Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You've stacked your sources, and now we're here to pull out the essential knowledge and insights you need. Today, we're taking a sharp left turn from the coastal hype and heading deep into the interior of the American West.
We are. Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into a state of, well, intense geographical, economic, and political contrasts. Idaho.
Right, and it's a state that's often lazily summarized by its most famous crop, right? The potato.
Exactly. But our sources reveal a place that's really defined by extremes. I mean, from Hell's Canyon, which is the deepest gorge in the U.S.
Deeper than the Grand Canyon, believe it or not.
Deeper than the Grand Canyon, all the way to a population growth rate that is, right now, one of the fastest in the entire nation.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're focusing on Idaho, officially known as the Gem State. It was admitted as the 43rd state on July 3, 1890. And its motto is Esto Perpetua.
Which is Latin for let it be perpetual.
Let it be perpetual. And, given everything we are about to discuss, the booms, the contradictions, the political volatility, that motto takes on a really fascinating significance.
It absolutely does. We are diving into a comprehensive stack of material that covers everything. I mean, ancient human history that overturns textbook timelines,
Wow.
the massive economic shift from, mining and agriculture to high tech, and the complex political structure that is currently grappling with some of the most cutting-edge legal issues in the country.
So our mission here is to provide you, the listener, with a thorough understanding of Idaho that, respects its complexity, goes far beyond that iconic potato status. To start, let's go straight to the first and, frankly, most absurd discovery in our sources. The origin of the name Idaho itself.
Yes.
This is less about ancient history and more about, a spectacular piece of political theater and fabrication.
It's a classic aha moment in American history, for sure. So in the early 1860s, Congress was busy organizing territories in the Rockies. And this man, a guy named George M. Willing, he shows up. He's claiming to be an unrecognized delegate from this unofficial, self-proclaimed Jefferson territory. And he suggests the name Idaho.
And he didn't just suggest the name, right? He gave it this whole elaborate backstory that sounded so official and, crucially beautiful.
Exactly. Willing claimed that Idaho was derived from a Shoshone term. He asserted it meant something like, the sun comes from the mountains, or maybe gem of the mountains.
Which is the perfect pitch.
It's the perfect pitch. It's tailored for a pristine, mineral-rich western region. You couldn't write it better.
But here's the central deception, and it's a big one. It was later conclusively revealed that no such Shoshone term actually existed.
Not at all.
The name was a complete, deliberate fabrication. Willing eventually confessed that he might have been inspired by meeting a little girl named Ida.
A little girl named Ida? I mean, the initial reaction from Congress was, understandably, deep skepticism. Because the name appeared fabricated and untrustworthy, they just rejected it outright. In February 1861, they opted instead to organize the land that would have been Idaho as the Colorado Territory.
So the name was tossed out, deemed a fraud. And that really should have been the end of it.
It should have been.
But momentum's a strange force in history, isn't it? And the name had already started to stick in the public consciousness even before it was official.
That's right. Before the official rejection, the town of Idaho Springs, Colorado, had already been named based on Willing's initial very high-profile proposal. The name was just out there, and it was attached to a place people were finding gold.
And this is where the name gets its lifeline and truly takes root, not through the fabricated Shoshone origin, but through, of all things, maritime transport.
It's a great irony. So in that same year, 1861, the name was formalized way out in the western region of the Washington Territory. A county was established named Idaho County after a steamship named the Idaho. This steamship had been launched in 1860 on the Columbia River. It was making regular runs and was, clearly very popular.
So to summarize that bizarre origin, a hoax leads to a town name, which leads to a steamship name. And the name just stuck so firmly to the county that when Congress carved up the region, they decided to ignore their original rejection.
Basically, yeah. The original Idaho County became the heart of the newly established Idaho Territory in 1863.
It's a perfect bureaucratic ghost story. A politician's lie became cemented as truth through a combination of local usage and a popular vote.
A profound study in accidental etymology. And while the name's origin is questionable, the human history of the land itself is anything but. It's profoundly deep, and it actually challenges our understanding of how North America was first settled.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for those of you who track the history of the continent. We've had evidence of early human activity in Idaho for a long time, like artifacts found at Wilson Butte Cave near Twin Falls.
Right, and those date back 14,500 years.
Which is already pre-Clovis, the traditional benchmark for North American settlement.
But the truly game-changing discovery came much more recently, at the Cooper's Ferry site near Cottonwood. Excavations there in 2019 unearthed artifacts that were conclusively dated using advanced radiocarbon methods
To when?
to between 15,300 and 16,600 years ago.
Wow. So why does that specific date range change the narrative so much? Why is that such a monumental finding?
Well, because for decades, the accepted theory, the one in all the textbooks, was the Beringia land bridge theory.
Right.
That theory said that people crossed a frozen land bridge from Asia into North America and then migrated south through an ice-free corridor that only opened up much later. But at 16,600 years ago, that land-based corridor was still solidly blocked by ice.
So if they weren't walking across the land bridge, how did they get there?
Well, this finding strongly supports the competing theory: the Pacific Coastal Water Route. The people who first inhabited Cooper's Ferry must have traveled along the coast, likely using some form of, rudimentary watercraft, and eventually settling south of the massive ice sheets.
And what's fascinating here is the physical evidence that connects Idaho across the ocean.
Yes. The tools found at Cooper's Ferry bear striking similarities to artifacts discovered in Japan, some dating back as far as 16,000 to 13,000 years ago.
Incredible.
The scientific conclusion is that the Columbia River mouth, which is very accessible to Idaho, essentially served as the ultimate ancient off-ramp from that coastal migration route.
So it was the first viable interior access point.
Exactly, the first viable path into the continent south of the ice sheet. Idaho was, quite literally, one of the first deep interior destinations for the earliest North Americans.
An incredible history of migration.
So moving forward, before permanent U.S. settlement, we see the established cultures of the American Indian peoples. Right. The two predominant groups were the Nez Perce in the north and the northern and western Shoshone in the south.
And when European contact finally accelerated, it wasn't initially American, was it? It was French-Canadian.
Precisely, and they left their linguistic mark all over the place.
I noticed that.
French-Canadian trappers and traders are responsible for so many of the place names that still exist today.
Nez Perce,
Pierce Nose,
Coeur d'Alene,
Heart of the All, or Sharp Heart.
and of course Boisé, meaning wooded, and Payette. This presence predates the famous Lewis and Clark expedition, which itself relied heavily on French and Métis guides.
Lewis and Clark crossed Idaho in 1805 and 1806, generally following the Clearwater River system. Our sources note that Idaho was one of the last states settled by European Americans. Why the delay?
Well, it was a mix of geography and geopolitics. Idaho was part of the huge Oregon country, which was subject to a major boundary dispute between the U.S. and Great Britain.
Okay. And that dispute wasn't resolved until the Oregon Treaty of 1846, which finally gave the U.S. undisputed jurisdiction. But even with jurisdiction, the distance and the incredibly rugged terrain made it daunting.
So when did the very first sort of tentative non-indigenous settlement arrive?
The first was Cully Spell House in 1809, established on Lake Pandore by the Northwest Company for fur trading. But these were really just temporary outposts.
Not real communities.
No. The first true attempts at organized permanent communities began much later, in 1860, established by Mormon pioneers moving north from Utah.
And the first actual incorporated community.
That was Lewiston in 1861, which benefited greatly from the initial gold rushes in the territory. And this early period was incredibly diverse, something that's often forgotten today.
I want to pause on one data point that truly underscores that diversity: the Chinese immigrant population.
It is a staggering figure, especially when you view it against modern perceptions of the state. Early in its territorial history, Idaho saw a huge influx of Chinese immigrants drawn by mining and labor opportunities.
How huge are we talking?
By 1870, get this, Chinese immigrants made up about 28.5% of the territory's entire population.
Almost a third of the population.
Yeah.
That must have completely reshaped the early economy and, I imagine, generated significant tension.
It did, on both fronts. They played a vital economic role in mining, railroad construction, and service industries. But their presence also fueled intense anti-Chinese sentiment and political movements that pushed for exclusionary legislation, reflecting broader tensions across the American West at the time.
A huge contribution that was often sidelined later on.
Absolutely. Their contribution to the foundations of Idaho is undeniable, even if the subsequent historical narrative often ignored it.
So by the time Idaho was pushing for statehood in 1890, The territorial period was marked by some serious internal struggles and political infighting.
Oh, it was far from smooth. Three major struggles really defined that era. First, the hugely controversial and, frankly, illegal transfer of the capital from Lewiston to Boise in 1864.
Which we will detail later, because
Yeah.
it's a great story.
It is. Second, the federal disenfranchisement of Mormon polygamists, a major political battle between the federal government and a large established portion of the population. The U.S. Supreme Court upheld that disenfranchisement just as Idaho achieved statehood.
And the third struggle was existential. I mean, Congress almost disassembled Idaho entirely.
Yes. There was a very serious federal attempt to split the territory, giving the northern panhandle to Washington, which achieved statehood in 1889, and the southern portion to Nevada, which had been a state since '64.
So Idahoans had to rally politically just to keep their territory intact.
They did. They had to prove they could function as a cohesive entity and fight to maintain their boundaries before finally achieving statehood in 1890.
Moving from the contested history to the contested geography, Idaho is undeniably defined by its rugged landscape. It's landlocked, bordering 6 U.S. states: Washington, Oregon, Nevada, Utah, Montana, and Wyoming. And it shares a short international border with the Canadian province of British Columbia.
And what really stands out and what defines Idaho's relationship with its land is the immense proportion of protected federal territory.
Right.
The United States Forest Service holds about 38% of Idaho's land. That is the highest proportion of any state in the nation. This means much of Idaho is actively managed for resources or preserved as wilderness.
And within that vast federal estate, there's one area that is truly colossal. It represents a commitment to preservation that's unmatched in the lower 48, the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness area.
At 2.3 million acres, this area is simply massive. It is the single largest contiguous area of protected wilderness in the entire continental United States.
And the name itself, River of No Return, hints at its nature.
It really does. Once you went in, the middle fork of the Salmon River was so turbulent and remote, it was incredibly difficult to return upstream. It just encapsulates how vast and wild this state truly is.
The wilderness creates these vertical extremes that are just staggering. We're talking about almost 12,000 feet of difference in elevation between the highest and lowest points.
The range is immense. The high point is Bora Peak in the Lost River Range, standing at 12,662 feet. The lowest point is Lewiston, way down at 710 feet, where the Clearwater and Snake Rivers converge before flowing into Washington.
And the Snake River, which defines so much of the state's human and agricultural history, has carved two of the most dramatic geographical features. Let's start with Hell's Canyon.
Hell's Canyon is a critical geographical fact. It's carved by the Snake River along the border with Oregon, and it is universally recognized as the deepest gorge in the United States.
To put that into perspective, you have to remember it's deeper than the Grand Canyon, though, far less famous.
Much less famous. The scale is immense, with sheer walls dropping thousands of feet down to the churning river.
And then there's Shoshone Falls.
Shoshone Falls, located near Twin Falls, is often called the Niagara of the West for good reason. It's a stunning natural feature, and at 212 feet, it is actually a waterfall that is higher than Niagara Falls.
So you have the deepest gorge and a waterfall taller than Niagara. That really confirms Idaho's status as a land of geological extremes.
It does. And while the Sawtooth Range, with its jagged peaks, is often considered the state's most famous mountain range and a symbol of its beauty, if you want to understand where people live and where the money is made, you have to focus on the critical Snake River Plain.
The Snake River Plain is the economic and demographic heart of Idaho.
Absolutely. Geologically, it's a vast, crescent-shaped valley that runs east-west across southern Idaho, formed by the path of the Yellowstone hotspot over millions of years. It's flat, fertile, and it contains the vast majority of the state's population and agricultural land.
What made this plain so crucial historically, beyond just being a good place to grow things?
It was a vital transit corridor. For settlers on the Oregon Trail, navigating the Rocky Mountains was the biggest hurdle. The plain provided a surprisingly accessible, relatively easy passage.
Right.
And crucially, as settlers traveled, many realized they didn't need to push onto the Oregon coast through the famously treacherous Blue Mountains and Cascade Range. The combination of easy travel and abundant volcanic soil made settling right there on the plain the path of least resistance.
So the easiest way through the mountains became the population center. We should probably define the two main regions within the plain because they represent distinct areas of commerce and identity.
Good point. The western segment is the Treasure Valley, centered around the capital. This is the region seeing the explosive urban and technological growth, containing Boise, Meridian, Nampa, and Caldwell.
And further east?
Further east, the central region is known as the Magic Valley, primarily centered around Twin Falls, and that region remains heavily focused on agriculture and food processing.
Now let's get into the practical implications of this geography, specifically the time zone split. This is pretty rare for a state and signals a genuine cultural and economic divide.
It does. Idaho is officially split into 2 time zones, with the dividing line running roughly through the middle of the state. The crucial distinction lies in the northern panhandle.
Which operates on Pacific time, aligning it with Seattle and eastern Washington.
Exactly. This northern region, including Coeur d'Alene, Moscow, and Lewiston, shares strong economic and cultural ties with Washington state. And importantly, this entire region contains less than a quarter of the state's population and land area.
So the vast majority of Idaho, the entire Snake River Plain, including Boise, Idaho Falls, Pocatello, Twin Falls, operates on mountain time.
Right, which ties it closer to Utah and Denver. It's a literal geographic expression of being pulled in 2 different directions.
Finally, we have to look at the climate, which is often misunderstood because of Idaho's inland position.
Yeah, the climate really defies simple categorization. Despite the state's western border being about 330 miles from the Pacific Ocean, the maritime influence is still significantly felt.
How so?
That moisture helps moderate temperatures, especially in the winter. It prevents the cold from reaching the extreme sustained levels you might find in truly continental locations further east.
And the surprise here is the existence of an actual inland temperate rainforest. That sounds totally contradictory to the image of a semi-arid mountain state.
It does, but it's real. The North Central Rockies forests receive high levels of precipitation, creating microclimates that constitute the North American inland temperate rainforest. It's a biodiversity hotspot.
But as you move eastward, that maritime influence fades completely.
It does, and the climate becomes a classic semi-arid continental one. The precipitation patterns actually reverse in the east. They see wetter summers and drier winters, and the temperature swings become far more extreme.
And we have the records to prove it.
Oh, we do. The highest recorded temperature was a blistering 118 degrees Fahrenheit recorded at Orofino in 1934, which sits at a very low elevation.
And the lowest.
The all-time lowest temperature was a staggering minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit recorded at Island Park Dam in 1943.
Wow. 178-degree difference. That underscores just how much environmental resilience is required to live and work in the gem state. When we transition to the economy, we're moving from a land of extremes to an economy of contrasts. You have this ancient, extractive, wealth-meeting, cutting-edge technology. And yes, we have to start with the famous spud.
You have to. The potato cannot be ignored, but it needs context. Idaho is the undisputed top potato-producing state, supplying nearly 1/3 of the entire nation's yield.
And this is all centered on the Snake River Plain.
Overwhelmingly centered on the irrigated, fertile soil of the Snake River Plain.
But if we look beyond the potato, Idaho is a much broader agricultural powerhouse. What are some of the specific niche areas where it leads the nation?
Well, it's a major producer of aquaculture, specifically trout. It also leads the nation in the production of Austrian winter peas and lentils. So it has a diverse, intensive agricultural output that feeds directly into its extensive food processing industry.
And this is where we find that very cool, highly specific detail about the scale of industrial food processing. Yeah. The world's largest factory for barrel cheese.
Right, located in Gooding. This factory belongs to the Glanbia Group, and barrel cheese is the raw product used primarily for processed cheese. So think sliced cheese, fast food dairy products.
And the scale is just immense.
Oh, it is. 120,000 metric tons per year. This demonstrates that Idaho isn't just growing raw goods, it's a critical industrial hub converting those raw goods into mass-market food products for global consumption.
Moving underground, the state's nickname, the Gem State, is well-earned. It stems from its production of 72 varieties of precious and semi-precious stones.
And mining played a foundational role in statehood. It was the original wealth generator. Gold, silver, and lead mining were hugely significant early in the state's history, fueling the initial population booms.
And while that reliance has lessened, modern mining remains strategically vital, especially when we look at certain geological formations.
Yes, and I want to focus on the Idaho Cobalt Belt, which is located in the Salmon Chalice National Forest.
Okay, why is this specific resource so critical today?
Well, cobalt is a strategic national resource. The Idaho Cobalt Belt is one of the largest cobalt deposits in the U.S. and potentially North America.
And why does that matter now?
Because cobalt is essential for modern energy storage. It's a key component in the lithium-ion batteries used in electric vehicles, consumer electronics, and defense technology.
So having a domestic supply is huge.
It's huge. It insulates the U.S. from supply chain disruptions and geopolitical volatility. This deposit links Idaho directly to 21st century energy and defense policy.
So we have potatoes, gold, strategic metals. But Idaho successfully diversified its economy to include a massive science and technology sector, which must have been a conscious effort during the 1990s.
It was a highly successful expansion. Between 1991 and 2002, the state aggressively invested in and courted the science and technology sector. And by 2001, this sector accounted for over 25% of Idaho's gross state product.
A quarter of the entire economy.
A quarter. This rapid shift established a very complex economic base, deep industrial agriculture, crucial resource extraction, and high-tech electronics manufacturing centered primarily in the Treasure Valley.
We also can't overlook tourism, which feeds directly off that 38% of federal wilderness land we talked about.
Tourism is essential. Idaho's natural resources attract a huge number of outdoor enthusiasts for activities like camping, hunting, fishing, and whitewater rafting on the Salmon River, and of course skiing.
Right. Sun Valley is probably the most famous resort, and it holds a unique historical distinction.
It does. It's home of the world's first chairlift.
The first one ever.
Installed in 1936. Sun Valley is also North America's oldest ski resort. That speaks to Idaho's long-standing connection to outdoor recreation and luxury tourism, which continues to be a major economic driver.
Moving to infrastructure, the way Idaho generates and consumes energy presents a profound and, well, perhaps unsustainable paradox. This is something we must emphasize because it leads directly into our final thought.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is Idaho's genuine commitment to clean energy. Renewable sources accounted for 75% of Idaho's total electricity generation in 2022.
75%? That's a huge number.
It gives the state the fourth highest share of renewable electricity generation of any state. And the backbone of that is hydroelectric power.
Which makes sense with all the rivers.
Half of the state's utility-scale generating capacity is from hydro plants. The rest comes from other cleaner sources like wind, solar, and geothermal, with natural gas making up the remaining 25%. So they're definitely green on the generation side.
But the consumption side tells a completely different and worrying story.
It's the core tension. Idaho consumes almost 4 times more energy than it actually produces.
4 times.
Which means they are a massive net importer of energy. This high consumption rate places intense pressure on regional energy grids and means their sustainability metrics are often balanced against dependence on neighbors. When you combine this fact with the population boom, you see a major infrastructural challenge ahead.
And to finish the economy section, let's discuss transportation access, which is surprisingly robust given the mountainous terrain. The Port of Lewiston is a logistical miracle.
It truly is. The Port of Lewiston is the farthest inland seaport on the West Coast, accessible to deep draft barges. It sits 465 river miles from the Pacific Ocean at Astoria, Oregon.
That's incredible.
This access is maintained by a comprehensive system of dams and locks along the Snake and Columbia rivers, allowing Idaho's massive agricultural and manufacturing outputs to be barged straight to the Pacific.
And it's equally connected by land.
It is. Idaho is served by 3 major transcontinental railroads: BNSF, Union Pacific, and Canadian Pacific Railway. And although Amtrak's Empire Builder only clips the northern panhandle, stopping just once in Sandpoint, the freight rail network is crucial for moving goods across the continent.
It's clear Idaho has fantastic infrastructure for moving goods out of state. But the real question is, does it have the infrastructure, the water, the power, the roads for moving millions of people into the state?
And that's the issue.
Let's dive into that extraordinary population boom, which is fundamentally reshaping the gem state.
The growth statistics are remarkable. Idaho's population is now approximately 2 million people in 2024. More importantly, the state saw a massive 17.3% increase in population between 2010 and 2020.
17.3%.
That was the second fastest rate of growth of any state that decade, only trailing Utah.
That level of growth isn't usually driven by natural births alone. The sources show the net migration figures are huge.
The majority of this growth is people moving in. Between 2010 and 2018, the total population increase included a net migration increase of over 75,000 people.
75,000.
And a striking statistic is that over 61,000 of those people were internal migrants, meaning they moved from other U.S. states. They are seeking the lifestyle and a relative affordability of Idaho, though that affordability is rapidly eroding due to this very influx.
And this rapid movement has focused almost entirely on the Snake River Plain, fueling incredible urban sprawl, particularly in the Boise metropolitan area.
The growth in the Treasure Valley is exponential. Cities like Meridian and Nampa are textbook examples of explosive sprawl. Meridian, which had fewer than 10,000 residents in 1990, exploded to over 75,000 by 2010.
That's incredible growth.
Nampa followed suit, going from under 29,000 to over 81,000 in the same period. Managing that kind of rapid expansion, especially for water, roads, and schools, is a huge political challenge.
When we look at the ethnic makeup of this booming population, the majority remains of European descent, with large, historically entrenched ancestry groups.
Right. German ancestry is the largest group at 17.5%, followed closely by English ancestry at 16.4%. These groups reflect the early waves of settlers who came via the Oregon Trail and subsequent migration.
However, the demographic profile is diversifying quickly, which we can see clearly in birth data.
Yes. The Hispanic or Latino population is the fastest growing non-European group. In 2023, the Hispanic Latino population accounted for 19.0% of births, a significant rise from 15.3% in 2013.
And the largest group within that is Mexican.
Mexican, yes, reflecting both modern immigration and historical migration patterns related to agricultural labor.
And if we look at modern global immigration, what are the top origins?
The top countries of origin for immigrants in 2018 were Mexico, Canada, the Philippines, China, and Germany. It highlights the continued global appeal of the state, especially for work and education. And, we already mentioned the incredible historical diversity, specifically the 28.5% Chinese population in 1870, showing that these cultural shifts are not new to Idaho.
Moving back to the original inhabitants, Idaho is home to 5 federally recognized tribes.
These include the Shoshone-Bannock and the Shoshone-Paiute, the Coeur d'Alene, the Kootenai, and the Nez Perce. Their lands and water rights continue to be a significant factor in resource management discussions across the state.
Finally, let's look at the religious landscape, which is heavily Christian, but highly concentrated in certain specific denominations, creating a unique social texture.
Idaho is overwhelmingly Christian, with 72% of the population identifying as such in 2022. The largest self-identified group is Protestant at 37.0%.
The single largest denomination is Mormonism.
Correct. Specifically, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints accounting for 24.0% of the population. This concentration has profound cultural and political impacts, particularly in eastern Idaho.
But mirroring national trends, the religiously unaffiliated population is also very significant.
Yes. The unaffiliated population, those identifying as atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular, makes up 26% of the state as of 2022. So while the religious identity is strong, particularly the LDS influence, a quarter of the population identifies outside of any formalized religion.
So if the demographics are defined by rapid change, the political structure of Idaho is defined by deep, almost unbroken tradition. The story here is one of Republican dominance that has lasted for generations.
It is one of the most consistently Republican states in the country. The clearest data point is the presidential vote. Idaho has not supported a Democrat for president since Lyndon B. Johnson in 1964.
Since 1964. Wow. And that allegiance is strongly reflected in current voter registration figures.
Looking at October 2025 data, the numbers are stark. Republicans account for 61.71% of registered voters. Unaffiliated voters make up 25.07%, leaving Democrats with only 11.79%.
And that electoral reality translates directly into legislative control.
Absolutely. Both the state Senate and the House of Representatives have been continuously controlled by Republicans since 1960.
Since 1960.
It's important to note, however, that this isn't a perfect monolith. Democrats routinely win seats in the key urban and recreational pockets, the university hubs of Boise and Pocatello, Blaine County, which contains the very affluent Sun Valley, and areas in the northern panhandle closer to Washington state.
We mentioned earlier the fascinating historical friction that existed during the territorial period. The early politics were actually much more contested.
They were. Early territorial legislatures were Democrat-controlled, which led to constant, often aggressive clashes with the Republican-appointed territorial governors. This era of friction really laid the groundwork for the future political intensity.
And this brings us back to that incredible anecdote, the controversial move of the capital from Lewiston to Boise, which you said felt like a heist film.
It basically was.
Walk us through the details of how an official stole the capital.
Okay, so it was essentially a coup. The shift was decided by the legislature, but the physical transfer was anything but orderly. In 1864, Clinton DeWitt Smith, the Secretary of the Territory who favored Boise, physically removed the territorial seal and the Constitution from a locked safe in Lewiston.
He just took them.
He took them and transported them to Boise. By taking possession of those essential documents and symbols, he unilaterally completed the capital transfer, bypassing formal protocols and establishing Boise as the undeniable seat of power. It set a precedent for high-stakes, aggressive political maneuvering.
A truly wild way to choose a capital city. Now, moving to the governance structure today, the state still operates under its original 1889 Constitution. What are the key operational features?
Well, one critical requirement enshrined in that Constitution is fiscal conservatism. The state government is legally required to maintain a balanced budget.
Okay.
On the administrative side, the state runs an alcohol monopoly through the Idaho State Liquor Division. The state gambling lottery is also a significant revenue generator, contributing over $333 million to public schools and higher education between 1990 and 2006.
And regarding personal finance, Idaho has adopted a relatively simple taxation structure.
It does, a flat personal income tax of 5.8%. The state sales tax is 6%, with limited local options that can push the total up to 6.5%.
And one key detail that often surprises people is that food is taxed.
Right. General groceries and food items are subject to the sales tax, though prescription drugs are explicitly exempt.
Now we have to turn to contemporary legal and political issues, which have placed Idaho at the center of national debates. And as always, we are reporting impartially on the policy details contained in the sources.
And these are some of the strictest laws in the U.S.
Yes, so Idaho has enacted one of the most restrictive abortion laws in the nation, effectively banning nearly all abortions in the state.
And the Idaho Supreme Court reviewed the state constitution and ruled that there is no constitutional right to abortion within Idaho's borders, allowing that near-total ban to stand.
And the state has taken this a step further, crossing a key legal threshold regarding movement and jurisdiction.
In April 2023, Idaho became the first state in the nation to restrict interstate travel for abortion services. This law specifically criminalizes the transport of a minor out of state for an abortion without parental consent.
And the source materials define this under the controversial term abortion trafficking.
That's the term used, yes.
So what have been the practical implications of these highly restrictive laws on the state's medical community and healthcare access?
The sources indicate a tangible and, well, detrimental impact on personnel. The strict laws have led directly to an outmigration of physicians, particularly those specializing in maternal and fetal care.
So they're losing doctors.
They are. And this creates significant challenges, especially for women in rural areas of the state, as the loss of these specialized doctors concentrates expertise in fewer locations, increasing the distance and difficulty in accessing comprehensive care.
Finally, we must mention the state's retention of the death penalty and its authorized methods of execution.
Idaho retains the death penalty, and in a move that received national attention, a bill passed in March 2023 authorized the firing squad as a method of execution. This decision is currently pending a legal challenge, but it highlights the state's staunch commitment to capital punishment.
Let's shift gears to education and public health, areas where the state's political and cultural climate collides directly with governance. Starting with education, the system is overseen by the State Board of Education.
Right, and Idaho's higher education system is defined by 3 comprehensive public universities. The oldest is the University of Idaho in Moscow, founded in 1889, which is the state's land-grant institution and primary research university. Then you have Idaho State University in Pocatello, which started in 1901, and Boise State University, BSU, which has seen massive growth and became a university in 1974.
And given the strong religious demographics we discussed, the private institutions reflect that influence.
Absolutely. Brigham Young University, Idaho in Rexburg is affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it draws a significant student population. We also have Northwest Nazarene University in Nampa and the College of Idaho in Caldwell.
And the K-12 system shows the incredible range of Idaho's geography and population density. It has 105 school districts and 62 charter schools.
And those districts range wildly in enrollment, from some rural districts with as few as 2 students to the largest, which has over 39,500 students.
Wow, 2 students.
This huge variation in scale means the challenges of funding and infrastructure management are unique to almost every part of the state.
They're moving to health policy. Idaho was frequently in the national spotlight during the COVID-19 pandemic, facing intense public health challenges that were exacerbated by the political climate.
This is a crucial area where the state's strong political identity shapes the health response. During the pandemic, hospitals were so overwhelmed by COVID-19 patients that Idaho was forced to enact statewide crisis standards of care.
Meaning they were rationing resources?
They were rationing resources, and at the same time, the state had one of the lowest COVID-19 vaccination rates in the country as of late 2021.
And the most recent development in 2024 shows how contentious the vaccine issue remains at the local level.
This illustrates a major tension point in local governance. In October 2024, a local health department responsible for 6 rural counties voted 4-3 to stop providing COVID-19 vaccines to residents entirely.
And this decision was made despite urgent pleas from mainstream healthcare providers and epidemiologists.
It was.
So what drove that local vote? Was it purely medical?
According to the sources, the decision was heavily influenced by public comments. They received over 290 comments, many of which voiced strong opposition to vaccine mandates or, critically, opposed the use of taxpayer funding for the vaccines, even though there were no current mandates in place.
So it reflects a deep political skepticism regarding public health intervention and funding priorities.
That's right.
Finally, let's wrap up with Idaho's place in popular culture, which often focuses on its stunning geography and its unique cultural touchstones.
The state is really synonymous with outdoor sports and wilderness. Sun Valley, with its historical significance as North America's oldest resort, remains a major draw. And its natural setting makes it a popular filming location for Hollywood, often standing in for the rugged American West.
And we have a great mix of classic westerns and quirky comedies filmed there.
We do. Pale Rider from 1985, the Clint Eastwood Western, was filmed extensively in the Boulder Mountains and the Sawtooth National Recreation Area.
Right.
Dante's Peak from 97 used the town of Wallace as its primary filming location. And then you have the films that capture the unique, often eccentric cultural spirit of the state. My Own Private Idaho, and of course the quintessential cult film, Napoleon Dynamite.
Napoleon Dynamite, which takes place in Preston, the director's actual hometown. #outro. This deep dive has truly pulled back the curtain on Idaho, revealing a state that is just full of fascinating contradictions. We moved from a naming story that was born as a political hoax and was saved by a popular steamship
to a prehistoric settlement timeline that is rewriting the history books of the entire continent.
We've explored a landscape of geographic extremes, home to the deepest gorge and a waterfall higher than Niagara, and a massive population boom focused entirely on the historic Snake River Plain.
And we've seen an economy rooted in agriculture and strategic cobalt mining, but really driven by a high-tech manufacturing sector.
And we've highlighted a political system steeped in Republican dominance, a system so conservative that it led to the controversial theft of the territorial capital, and which today grapples with some of the most cutting-edge complex legal issues in the nation.
From abortion laws that restrict interstate travel to authorizing the use of the firing squad.
Idaho is a state of intense contrasts, struggling to manage rapid modern growth alongside deep-rooted cultural and political traditions.
It really is.
So what does this all mean for the perpetual state? We have to revisit that infrastructural paradox.
We do. And here's a provocative thought for you to consider. Idaho utilizes 75% renewable energy, primarily hydro, yet it consumes nearly 4 times the energy it produces.
4 times.
This immense consumption gap, coupled with a 17% population boom fueled by thousands of new residents every year, places extraordinary pressure on the state's massive yet ultimately finite natural resources.
And you have to remember that 38% of the land is protected federal territory, creating this constant tension between growth and preservation.
So the question is this. What future trade-offs in water rights, in land use policy, in energy imports will Idaho have to make to perpetually maintain its gem state identity while managing the infrastructural demands of being one of America's fastest-growing states?
A truly challenging question for the state's future. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.